So the point of this slide is that I'm going to discuss a few things that many of you might consider to be controversial. And so I want you to be open to new concepts, and because the title of the talk is Your Career: How to Manage It Through Trials, Tribulations, and Successes. And I'm going to use some of my own trials and tribulations and successes to illustrate. And this is the first of the biggies. It's okay to fail. And a lot of people over the years, particularly if you go overseas, Japan or Korea, for example, it's not okay to fail. And I think that is one of the beauties of the American culture, the American business culture, that it is, and I'm going to suggest it's not only okay to fail, it is essential to fail from time to time, because it is such a fabulous learning experience, number one. Number two, it means that you are willing to take risks with your careers. You all would not be here. You would not be in the position you are in unless you had terrific capabilities, a great resume. You guys are going to do very, very well. So that you have no excuse not to take risks. And run the, you know, and obviously when you take risks, you're going to run the risk of having a failure, of having a bad patch. And I'm suggesting that that actually is a good thing. And I'm going to use myself as an example. When I started at Fidelity, and as Norm said, it was just a few years ago, my first 2 years, I was hot out of the box. I was a junior analyst, and everything I was recommending was going straight up. And I got this reputation of being on fire. So within a very short period of time, this was a huge mistake on the part of Fidelity's management. They gave me a fund to manage. Well, Fidelity at the time had only 8 funds. I mean, here I am. I'm 2 years out of school, and they're giving me a fund to manage. Long and the short of it is that I continued to manage that fund in the same way that I had been making recommendations over the first 2 years at Fidelity. And I had been recommending speculative stocks because from the summer of '66 until the end of '68, I mean, it was one of the hottest period for speculative stocks ever. So I got this fund in early '69. And almost immediately, the market starts to tank. And I'm running the fund the way I had been running my life, my career, and my recommendations of the prior 2 years. I was so bad. My fund was starting to perform so badly in such a short period of time that they actually took me off the fund within 45 days. Now, this has got to be an all-time record, that somebody is so bad that they are going to remove you from a position that you just started in 45 days later. It was embarrassing. It was embarrassing to me, to my family, to my friends, certainly to my self-esteem. But in hindsight, it was the best thing that ever happened to me, because I was forced to confront why I had been a failure. And boy, did I learn a lot of stuff. And then they made me an assistant fund manager on the very fund that I had been removed from which I had been removed. And then I was assistant manager on Fidelity Fund the following year, and then I was an assistant manager the following year, so now we're 3 years as an assistant fund manager. And I'm gradually, finally learning how to run money. I'm finally learning what it's all about to run a fund. So 3.5 years later, after I had this dreadful experience, they gave me another fund. Now I'm ready for it. However, the first 1.5 years, my results were only mediocre. So I had to look again at myself and say, Bruce, what are you doing? What is the matter with you? I would have given, frankly, my results, my first 1.5 years, again, now I've had all this so-called experience, I would have given myself a gentleman's C. I was sort of average. And so I got very, very lucky. I had a meeting with an inference service in New York City that was brought to me as part of, brokers have their own specialty, and one of the specialties of the broker that I was using was inference service. And they had brought in a Mensa, and these guys analyzed the heck out of me, and because I said to them, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm only average. And what they found was that my left brain was exceedingly capable, almost too capable. That's the logical, the analytical, the linear, all that quantitative kind of stuff. My right brain was almost not even in the game. And the right brain is the creative side. That's the inductive, that's the spatial, that's the observational part of the brain. So this guy proved to me that I was a one-sided person. And it was the best thing that ever happened to me, falling into this situation where they actually analyzed who I was and what I was and why I was managing the way I had been. So what I started to do, I took brain courses on what it is. And by the way, Mr. Johnson, Ned Johnson has been the owner and the CEO of Fidelity for all these years, and he just handed it over to his daughter, Abby. But when I joined the firm, his father, Mr. Johnson, was the CEO, the boss. So for the first 6 years of my lifetime, my career at Fidelity, I was working for Mr. Johnson, and he always had said that the market is a combination of an art and a science, and and that, of course, is the right brain and the left brain. So he knew that that investing is a whole-brained kind of a deal. And I would suggest that in whatever career you get into, that you're going to need both sides of your brain. Well, my right brain was so insufficient that I started taking, as I said, brain courses. I took art courses. I took an art course called Drawing on the Right Side of Your Brain. I started listening to classical music. I started eating left-handed because, as you know, the right brain controls the left side of the body, and I wanted to develop my right brain. So I started eating left-handed. I tried to draw and write left-handed. That's very tough to do. But I shot baskets in my backyard, left-handed. And I got very, very good at shooting baskets from about 14 feet. I was making 2/3 of my shots left-handed. And that was pretty extraordinary. So I really, and I started to force myself to be observational. Because the right side of your brain is the side of your brain that can look at the forest and see the trees and the forest. I had only been seeing the trees. And so I started becoming inductive, and I started becoming observational, and it really made a tremendous difference. Then in 1975, I took a course called EST, and it was over 2 weekends and 3 nights, and it was basically like being in 5 years of psychoanalysis. It was an extraordinary opportunity. It's now called the Landmark Forum. And basically what it took you through so many different parts of your life that at the end of it, you finally saw how you really were running your life. Because if you don't know how you're running your life, it's hard to change it. And I found out that I was very impatient, that I got angry very, very quickly. And that really interferes with being observational. If you're immediately concerned about what has already happened, not a good thing. So frankly, I learned creativity. And a lot of people say people who are creative, who are artistic, they're born. You can't learn it. That's baloney. And I'm the perfect example that you can learn creativity. So I learned how to manage growth with people, with processes, how to deal with overload, and very importantly, how to accept an intuitive aha moment. Because the left brain, if let's say you're in the shower in the middle of the night and something comes to you, and you say, you know, it's one of those aha moments, epiphanies. And if you're a left brain person, you're going to reject that. Because you're going to say, I don't know where that came from, and if I can't track where that came from, I'm going to reject it. Don't ever do that. If something comes to you in the middle of the night, or comes to you where you're in the shower, and it's an aha, that may be one of the most important events coming to you. Don't reject it. Just because you can't, the right brain has already done thousands of computations and calculations and analyses to get to that epiphany. It's already done the work. But it's up to you to accept that it's done the work, because you can't see all of the analyses. So let me summarize this page. It's very important to discover your deficiencies. And every one of you has deficiencies. I don't care how good you are, how good your resume is, how experienced you think you are, how successful everybody in this room has deficiencies, and it's up to you to find out what they are and work on them. And very importantly, sharing your problems. At Fidelity, we like to have small groups small groups of analysts or small groups of fund managers. And I encourage all of our people to share when they're having problems, and share with your families. And you know, everybody's going to go through a bad patch. And your family is going to understand that. And as a matter of fact, your family is going to say, I'm so glad that you are sharing problems that you are having. And then they will help out. They can help out. So actively remedy those deficiencies. In the process, you're going to learn new skills. It's going to force you to improve your observational skills. It's going to force you to have a healthier lifestyle. And I'll get into that later when we talk about how to win. And I say that it teaches leadership skills because eventually all of you are going to be in a leadership position. And that may be difficult to comprehend right now, but eventually you're all going to be leaders. And what I'm suggesting is that you tell your people that are working for you and with you to come to you if they're having a problem. Come to you if they're having a deficiency. In other words, make sure that you have let it be known that it's okay for your people to have deficiencies, to have a bad patch. And I'm going to be very, very hard on this one. Only risk takers win. By definition, if you are the same as everybody else, if you're not taking a risk over and above what everybody else is taking, by definition, you can't win. If you're doing exactly what everybody else is doing, how can you possibly win? You have to be different to win. You have to take risks. Now, it's very important that you try very, very hard to remember where you electronically transferred mommy and daddy's assets. So there are some risks that you don't want to take. This is one. So don't let, when you get into a position where you have cousins around, particularly if they're young, don't let them go off with your cell phone or your iPad. Because all kinds of crazy things can happen. So I'm suggesting that you all are here at a good time. Why do I say that? Well, the bears have been out this summer. It's been a little different than the normal year. The market is down for the year. The bear has become a little bit more frisky. And the bull has taken a breather. So why is that good? It's also good that we've had a slow economy. As a matter of fact, this has been the worst economic recovery from a recession since the 1930s. And this chart sort of analyzes it for you. What this chart shows is that normally within 3 to 4 years of a financial debacle, some sort of a recession, you get back to a higher level of employment. This recession, which is in red here, it took 7 years before we exceeded the prior peak of employment. And by the way, if you take out the state of Texas, we're still not there. And that's in spite of the fact that we added 15 million employable people over this period of time. So why in the world is this a good thing that we're coming in when things are so slow? Well, I'm saying that gives you opportunities. When things are really hunky-dory, well, then everything's already swimming beautifully, and you're not going to have the opportunity to make as much of a difference. But now we're coming in. Economic growth has been lousy the last 6 or 7 years. Inflation and interest rates remain low. Geopolitical turmoil, and you see that in the headlines every day, and I'm convinced that when there is this kind of slowness, sluggishness, that provides opportunities. Now, you don't want it to be so bad the way it was back in 2008 when we had a leveraged financial system and we were in the middle of a home price bubble collapse, stock market crash, governments going nuts trying to rescue the situation, natural gas at $14. But the right side, you can see we are in much, much better shape. Not great shape, but in much better shape than we were back in 2008. So I'm suggesting that when you do have risks, when you have slow growth and sluggishness, that's when you have opportunities. You can make a difference in your career when there are opportunities. I mean, this guy is very ominous, and you saw that in this morning's headlines. We've got an election cycle over the next 14 months, which is going to present opportunities, let's say. And these guys are definitely caught in a quagmire. All of them, with the possible exception of India, are having a very difficult time. China in particular has got all kinds of problem. And the problem with this, of course, is that China has been the growth engine of the world. So they've got all kinds of issues now that they're having to deal with. So my point is that anytime you have risks and slow growth, there are opportunities for you all to make a difference when you get out in the world. I mean, the people in Washington have been kicking the can down the road, not dealing with the issues. You've got people walking under the influence. So there's a lot of not so good stuff and a lot of risks. And again, I want you to equate this with opportunity. Now, this doesn't mean that you don't look behind you. You always want to look behind you, just to be on the safe side. So there are risks, and I said there are opportunities as well. The central bankers all around the world are printing money like crazy. All they do is just adjust the wheel, and more money pumps out. Prime Minister Tsipras went to Germany and romanced Angela Merkel. And so the Greek thing has receded a little bit. So there's a lot of good stuff out there as well. So you got bad stuff and you got good stuff. And I'm saying that these are tremendous opportunities for all of you when you get out in the business world. So here's the other really key slide here in terms of how to win. And as I said at the outset, to win, you got to be different. It's by definition, if you're not different, and let's not kid ourselves. A lot of competitors out there, a lot of talented people, very technologically skilled. So let me give you a few suggestions on how to be different. And I think attitude may be the most important thing. And what I mean by attitude, I mean you want to go into your career with the idea that you're going to make a difference, that you're going to win, you're going to be a winner, you're going to be a risk taker. You have come out of a great school here, you will have come out of a great school here, that you're going to have the skills. And so the question is, are you going to mesh those skills with the right attitude? And by the way, I'm encouraging you to try to figure out, and this is not easy, what your passion is. So you want to mesh your skills with your passions and the right attitude. So that's the first thing. And I see it so often in my business, in the investment management business, where people play it close to the vest. They try to just barely beat the averages. They almost set up their funds so that it looks like the S&P 500, and then they tweak it here and they tweak it there. They're not playing to win. They're playing not to lose. I'm saying that ultimately you're going to get found out. If you play not to lose, in the long run, that is a loser's game. You want to play to win. And these are all of the various ways, and I'll get into them. Obviously, you want to be with the right organization. And by the way, when you get into an organization, I want you to look at that organization in terms of its structure, in terms of its people, in terms of its incentives, in terms of the goals that are set at the beginning of the year, and the reward structure. And you may think, oh, well, I'm a junior person, I really shouldn't stick my nose out. In the long run, or even in the short run, I think to me, I was always so impressed when some of the younger folks would come up to me and say, you know, I really think we ought to tweak the, not just the goals, but also the way we are measuring the goals and the way we are paying the bonus when you reach your goals. And I found it very, very interesting that young people would come to me and say, we got to change the structure. So don't ever go in and just accept the way an organization is being run. Now, obviously, you have to be sensitive to who your boss is. Not all bosses are going to encourage this. But I think the right kind of boss is going to encourage you to open your mouth and to make suggestions when it comes to organization, structure, incentives, the kind of people you recruit. Boy, is that important. And obviously, day one on the job, you're not going to be involved in recruiting the next person in. But in the long run, you want to try to recruit people that are as good or better than you are. And I know that's a very sensitive kind of a thing, but you want to make the organization really a great organization. The only way you're going to do that is if when you are part of the recruiting team, and all of you will be eventually part of the recruiting team, you want to recruit people that are as good or better than you are. And you'll obviously have to think about the kind of people you're going to want to recruit, depending on what business you're in. So let me go down some of this stuff here. Organization structure, talent, incentives, whole brain skills. I don't think I need to emphasize that anymore. Really make sure that you have both sides of your brain working at the top level. When I say look at the P as well as the E, some people try to do things that are only going to be growth-oriented. Oh, I want to be with the best company, the best technology. And what I'm suggesting is there are some times where you may want to look at something a little bit inferior to the best if it's really, really cheap. Now, in my business, it's a little easier to say that because there are some people in my business who only buy in their fund great companies, really, really great companies with fabulous technology and great earnings record and a great outlook. Well, I ran an equity income fund and I never bought one of those kind of companies, ever. I bought junk. I bought stuff that was in the basement, the sub-basement, the subterranean stuff, the stuff where people had had a bad problem and the stock had cratered. That's the kind of stuff that I looked at. So there are plenty of ways to make money, and all I'm suggesting is don't just say, oh, I got to always be doing the best thing, because the best thing is also likely to be the most expensive thing. And so I'm suggesting that think about valuation as well as just excellence. That's what I mean by look at the P, meaning the price, as well as the E, the earnings outlook. Play to win, we've talked about that a lot. Are you fit for the battle? This is somewhat controversial, but boy, do I believe in this strongly, having done this for 50 years. I'm suggesting there's almost nothing more important than getting exercise. And I would suggest every day. Now, a lot of people say, oh, well, yes, I will get exercise and I'll fit it in at the end of the day. If you try to fit it in at the end of the day, you'll never get to it. You got to schedule it. And you got to schedule it so that it's integral to your daily schedule. And you got to make sure you do it, because it's not only good for your body, it's good for your brain. And a lot of people don't put enough value on that. Getting exercise is good for your brain, and it's going to help you sleep better. And those are so critical in the business world. You want to be in great condition up here as well as your body. And when I say develop your skills, that gets back to where I went through this very, very long process of finding out who I was and what worked for me and where my passion was. And so I would strongly suggest that you, in the process of looking at your deficiencies, you also attempt to figure out what you're good at, what you're best. Some people have to buy the best, have to be part of the best, only because it's just so ingrained in their brain. But I'm suggesting that you really look at the whole landscape and see what works for you. Where are your passions? And try to merge your passions and your skills together. Everybody has a different set of skills. The mega trends, that's where you look at the macro. You really do care about what's going on in Syria. You really do care about whether or not we have an inflationary environment or a deflationary environment or a growth environment, or China's growing and Brazil is not. You know, things like that. Now, that may not be important to your particular position, but I am suggesting that in the long run, you do want to be conscious of mega trends, of the macro. Don't ignore the overview. Now, I already said hunting the blow-ups. That was what I liked doing. That was a lot of fun. But you have to be willing to get your hands dirty when you're going to be hunting in the blow-ups, where to try to make money, you're going to be doing things, you're going to be working with organizations or people or concepts that are not exactly considered first rate. Beat the stress, so it's not just exercise, but every one of you is going to be in a position where you're going to be getting, and maybe you already are, 300, 400, 500 emails a day. You have to hit the delete button. And I mean delete, 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 delete. You got to get rid of that stuff. Now, does that mean that you are occasionally going to delete something important? Yes, it does. Is that person going to come back to you and say, hey, you didn't get back to me? Yes, they will. 99 times out of 100, you're going to get the person, the really important email. They're going to be all over you. They're going to say, hey, I emailed you back a ways and you did not respond. But some people think they've had a good day when they go through 400 emails. That's not a good day. That is a totally wasted day. You want to only deal with the important emails. And that means you are going to occasionally delete one or not look at one you should have looked at. But that person is almost always going to get back to you. You got to get in a mindset where you don't let that really bother you. All right, let me see if I have covered most of this stuff. Hunting the blow-ups, beat the stress. All right. So those are the key points. And I'm just going to very, very quickly go through the rest of the stuff because I know some of you have to leave at 12:20. Don't ignore epiphanies. Don't ignore the aha moment. I really mean that. I can't emphasize that enough. It comes to you in the shower, it comes to you, you're jogging, you're swimming, in the middle of the night. Don't ignore these epiphanies. They are very, very valuable. Here's a perfect example of a couple of places, one well-managed, well-organized, and the other not so. I think most of you probably know. This is a satellite photograph taken at night of Korea. This is South Korea. They got the game plan. They followed all the stuff that I just talked about. These guys didn't follow any of it. So the next few slides are just, if you're in the long run, if you're going to want to make a difference in the world, where you want to get out and harangue and start to try to convert people to everything that we have just talked about, then I would suggest that you try to make the private sector soil fertile. That we need incentives for growth in this country, because growth has been terrible, it's been inferior, and I'm suggesting that a lot of these are very good examples of how we can make the private sector, the private market, free markets, grow with less hindrance and at a higher rate. I mean, obviously, one example would be our tax code, 75,000 pages. It's a house of cards. Boy, if anything could be tweaked in a good way, this would be it. And I'm also suggesting we need to give instructions to Washington to get the country moving again. And again, these are a whole lot of suggestions. By the way, I've run a lot of these suggestions by senators, representatives, cabinet people, very, very senior people, and nobody disagrees with this stuff. It's amazing how they don't get anything done, but nobody disagrees with a lot of this stuff. So now one possibility is you just don't say a thing. Oh, they'll blame the dog. But I'm suggesting that we should speak up. I'm suggesting that we should make because look, we're all very, very smart people. We can add something. We can add value. And so I think we got to give more instructions to Washington so that we can do better in K through 12. We've got to get rid of subsidies. We've got to work on the tax code. We got to get the folks in D.C. By the way, is everybody aware that they have their own rules and regulations? They don't even live by our rules and regulations, the people in Washington. It's unbelievable. So, and obviously everybody is going to have to sacrifice. Nobody is going to get out of this without pain. We got to fix the problems that we have. And I'm going to end with this because we have a fabulous country. We have an extraordinary culture, work ethic and resilience and choice and mobility and innovation. We've got Silicon Valley. I mean, people of other countries would kill to have a Silicon Valley. We got it. We're the intellectual and financial magnet of the world. Highly competitive with the best university system on the planet. And you all are part of that. The best university system on the planet. I'm not saying K through 12. We still got work to do there. We got a lot of natural gas, a lot of fresh water, and we got freedoms. And boy, is that different from so many other countries. We got freedoms of ideas. You can actually talk about different ideas. Freedom of religion, how big is that? And we are a nation of immigrants. 98% of the forefathers, the ancestors of everybody in this room came from somewhere else. 98% of all your ancestors. And I think that's what has made this country great in terms of creativity, in terms of passion, in terms of energy. So Americans can always be counted on to do the right thing after they have exhausted all other possibilities. And by the way, if any of you are having a bad day, remember this. Today in 1976, Ronald Wayne sold his 10% stake in Apple for $800. It is now worth over $60 billion. So thank you all very much, and I'd like to field some questions. If anybody disagrees or has questions or whatever, please raise your hand. Yes, sir.
What is it that you changed about your approach that made your funds start performing better?
I started, and I was only looking at the individual trees. I was not looking at the forest and the trees. I never had an approach that encompassed, well, gee, these companies that I'm looking at, they're part of an industry, and the industry is part of a sector, and the sector is part of the economy. And until you get the big picture, you're just not going to make it. So I'm not saying that there aren't individual jobs where you're going to really want to home in on the nitty-gritty, on the very narrow stuff. But when you're managing a fund, as I was, it was a disaster. So that was one thing. The other thing was that I had been trained. I had actually been trained to disregard an aha moment because I didn't know where it came from. I mean, people would actually say to me, "You don't know where that came from. You know, you're going to put weight on that?" Well, I'm telling you, those are some of your best ideas when they come out of nowhere, because your right brain has already done a tremendous amount of work. So I just started being accepting of a lot of stuff that I had not been accepting of before. Somebody else had a hand up, I'm sorry. Where are they? Yeah, over here.
So you talked about finding your passion and how important was that, but do you have any advice how to go about finding that?
I think, and you may not want to hear this, but I think self-analysis is a huge advantage. There are tests you can take that will show you what you are really good at and what you are really interested in. And they're very observational. It's a lot better than going through 5 years of psychoanalysis, I'll tell you. And now I have not personally taken the Landmark Forum, but it again is over 2 weekends. And apparently they take you through your life like nobody's business. And you find out who you really are. And I think it's now the other thing is, ask your family and friends. Or just try to note take. Try to keep a grid of what you do during a day and make a notation, do I really like doing this? And find out, what I'm saying is, I hate to say this, but it's going to take some analysis to find out what your passion is. You probably already have a pretty good idea of what you're good at, but what you really like doing, that can be a little more subtle. So it'll take some work. It'll take some work. Anybody else? Let's see. Yes, in the back.
If you could recommend one book that relates to what you talked about today, what would that be?
A guy named Tony Buzan wrote a book, and I can't remember the exact title, but it is something, it's either learning or working using both sides of your brain. And that would be, to me, that was a game changer. Absolute game changer. So that would be my first suggestion, my primary suggestion. Anybody else? Anybody else? There's got to be somebody else. You can't get out of here until you ask a question. Yes, sir.
So what was like one epiphany that you had that helped you with business?
Let me hear you say that again.
What was like one
that really helps in my business, one epiphany. Well, this is going to sound awfully trite, but I would say that the most important thing was to stop focusing on the past. The past is past. You can't do anything about it. And why get so worked up about the past? Why get angry? Why get impatient? Why waste? How many people, including me, and I did this for years, I wasted so much energy when something had gone wrong, and I just oh my Lord, I constantly thought about it. Well, you can't do anything. It's over. It's in the past. You want to concentrate on what's ahead, the future. So that would be, so I had to get over my own anger. I had to get over my own unwillingness to not constantly think about, oh, gee, why did that happen? Why did I do that? Why did I get unlucky? Or why, that kind of stuff. So, yes, ma'am.
You've been in the business for a long time at Fidelity, it sounds like.
Yep.
You've stayed with them.
Yeah.
That's not what we're in now. You don't stay with the company that long.
Right.
Why did you stay there?
Why did I stay there? Well, I'll tell you, that's a very important. To stay with a company, you've got to be with a company that is willing to constantly change. Because as you just correctly pointed out, we're in a different environment now. Stuff is changing almost daily. And if you are not with a company that is willing to look at itself and say, I have got to be up to date, not for what happened 2 weeks ago or last year, but you got to look ahead. You got to be with a company that is constantly looking ahead and is willing to cannibalize itself, willing to change, willing to actually, I better be careful how I say this. But you have to be willing to accept the idea that, well, all that money that we just made from these fabulous ideas, that was yesterday. You got to be with a company that is willing to just constantly look ahead. And and Fidelity, thank God, is Ned Johnson was a marketing genius. And we brought out the first money fund with check writing privilege. Well, nobody had ever thought of that before. We were the first company on the planet to go 24/7 on our phone system. 24/7. Anybody calls our main number, they get a response. We did that 31 years ago. We were the first to come out with bond funds. We were the first to come out with sector funds. So you need constant change. And I was very, very lucky that I was and I'll leave you this because Norm is ready to throw me off the stage. Well, you have to. Service is crucial. You can't just be the best at technology or hardware or software. Service is absolutely crucial. So let me leave you with that. Thank you, Norm.